Text, Jobcast by Indeed, 6 Steps to a Successful Career Change. Brandy Warwas, Job Seeker Experience, Indeed.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Jobcast. Career change is a natural thing that happens in the course of our lives, and sometimes we get to be in control of it, and sometimes we don't. But today's Jobcast is meant to support you in feeling a sense of control and clarity about steps to take to shift in a new direction right now.
Meet your hosts, Lisa Lewis-Myler, CEO, Career Clarity, Brandy Warwas.
I'm excited to introduce our guest speaker today, Lisa Lewis-Miller. Lisa is a career change coach, author, and founder of Career Clarity, a company helping individuals figure out the best next step in their career paths. And that's me, Brandy Warwas. I'm on Indeed's Job Seeker Experience team. We're responsible for creating helpful resources and events like this Jobcast for our users, like you. So take it away, Lisa.
Brandy, thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you here. And thank you so much to everybody who is joining us live from the Indeed community and who is going to be watching the recording of today's broadcast.
6 Steps to a Successful Career Change.
So for 6 steps to a successful career change, our learning objective for today is going to be to talk about all 6 of these different pieces of the puzzle in depth so that no matter what your situation is, be it that you are in a job right now that doesn't feel like a good fit and you're thinking about mapping out steps to what's next, or if you're in the situation where because of what's been happening in the economy or in the world, you have been pivoted, you have needed to look at making a career change that maybe wasn't on your plan or wasn't what you had hoped or intended. No matter what your situation is, you'll walk away from this presentation today with actionable, tactical, and practical tips to start moving towards what's next quickly and efficiently. The 6 points that we're going to cover today include, number 1, deciding if now is the time to change careers. 2, understanding your unique talents, strengths, and gifts. 3, performing an in-depth career path discovery to see what is out there and where your skills and gifts might match beautifully to what the market and what the world needs. 4, selecting which specific roles to pursue that are the best fit. 5, rebranding and repositioning yourself in your professional materials to make sure that you look like a fabulous, ideal fit candidate on paper. And 6, officially starting the job search process. So let's dive in with step 1 of the 6 steps, which is decide if now is the time to change careers. This may be more relevant to some of you who are in the position of currently having a position and thinking about what's next, but trying to figure out if you have the financial runway and the time runway to be able to navigate making a transition. The first thing to do to figure out if now's the time is evaluate yourself and your current situation.
In an illustration, a woman looks through a door.
So one question to ask would be, is a career change the right answer to my challenges? One big thing to think about is that it may feel like a career change is what you need because you're noticing that there are a lot of things that you're not liking in your current situation or your current employment. But it may be that there are ways to make smaller pivots or changes that can address some of those things that don't feel good. For example, if you feel like you really enjoy the work that you're doing, you like the company that you're working for, you generally like the industry that you're in, but you're feeling really frustrated about your boss or potentially a specific team that you're working with and feeling so fed up that you're thinking about making a career change, it might be worth considering if there is a way to get a new supervisor, to move on to a different team, or to shake up the composition of the team that you're working on in such a way that it might feel more joyful and more life-giving for you. But there are certainly many other circumstances where a career change might be exactly what you need because perhaps you're feeling like your job is completely out of alignment with your interests or your gifts or your values. And in that case, oftentimes making a bigger change is going to be the right fit.
Evaluate yourself and your situation. Is a career change the right answer to my challenges?
Another question to consider is now the right time to be making a shift? So knowing that there are some different sectors of the marketplace that have been affected pretty dramatically right now, it's important to know what the reality of the economy is in the sector you want to move into. For example, I'm a career change coach, and a lot of the people who I work with are really excited about moving into a space like hospitality. Well, the hospitality sector has taken a really challenging hit, which we'll talk about a little bit later in today's presentation. So now might not be quite the right time to be going into hospitality, but it might be the right time to be moving into one of the other sectors that is much more healthy and growing right now. Yes, even despite what is going on in the world. A third question to sit with is the question of, can I weather the expected challenges? So this is a question of, if it's going to take me a little bit of time to make this transition. So for example, if you are working, let's say, or you were working in retail, and you knew that you had a great customer service focus and you're curious about moving into a customer service role for, let's say, a software company, you may have a challenge of getting a little bit more experience working with software to show how your skills and experiences transition over. So the question of, can I weather the expected challenges, may be a question of, do I have a little bit of time to play with to make that transition and to upskill? Do I feel like I have the financial runway to be able to do that? Do I feel like I have the resources and the support to be able to make that transition? And these are all things we'll talk about a little bit more as we get into the conversation today. But they're good considerations to have before you even start exploring what's out there, to make sure you're looking at the things that are going to be the best fit for you and your needs right now. And the corresponding question, the fourth question to evaluate yourself and your situation is it worth the expected challenges? If, let's say, you care a lot about getting to work with individuals and help support them, it may be a question of, if I say want to go into social work, and that's really different from what I used to be doing, is it worth the challenges of going back to school and getting an additional degree if that's what I need to do in my state? Is it worth the challenge of completely rebranding myself to pull off this big career move? Or is there perhaps a smaller scale version that I could take that would be a smaller leap, an easier transition to achieve, that could make my transition happen in a way that feels much more in alignment with what my current needs are? So these questions are great ones to be thinking about when you're starting to set yourself up to explore a career change. Now, like I mentioned, the pandemic has affected certain industries differently. So as you're thinking about where you might want to go and what you might want to explore and what the challenges might be in making that transition, think about what's happening in the area you want to move into. For example, there are absolutely some sectors of the economy right now that are winning. And historically, the Harvard Business Review ran a great piece on an article that was looking at recessions and trends within those recessions over time in the 80s, 90s, all the way up to the 2008 recession. And what they found in that study was really interesting, that 17% of the economy in these publicly traded companies that were part of their survey really suffered in a pandemic, or not in a pandemic, in a recession. But 9% of companies in each of these different recession situations was able to actually outperform their peers and thrive. So one of the things to be thinking about is, in our current situation with the pandemic, where are those 9%?
Impact of the pandemic on certain industries.
Indeed has done some fabulous work with their chief economist looking at what's happening across the marketplace. And what they've seen is that there are some areas that are absolutely performing well, like construction, warehouses, and driving and delivery services. And note that even within these, there's going to be some variation within the specific sector. So for example, in construction, if you are somebody who owns a home, you know right now, residential construction is booming. It's difficult to get appliances. It's difficult to get materials. It's difficult to get work crews if that's something that you want to be doing. But there's a cost as well. When you look at commercial properties, office spaces, and retail development, there is almost nothing happening in those worlds relative to how it might have looked a year or two ago. So pay attention to the micro trends going on. And the same thing is true across the sectors that fall into the rebounding, damaged, or paused categories here. Restaurants, clothing stores, hair salons, and dentists are all starting to see an uptick again now that many places are relaxing their restrictions on how many people can be inside of specific spaces, but there may still be some volatility and uncertainty left to come there. In the damaged sector, travel and tourism and arts and entertainment have absolutely taken a hit, and it may take a while to be able to fully recover. So those are sectors that it is going to be incredibly difficult to find employment in right now. And it might be a better short-term triage strategy to look in other sectors for the next year or two, and then think about getting back into these sectors once they are healthy and had a chance to fully recover. And in the paused category, in the tech, finance, and professional service space, the trend that we tend to be seeing is that there are not a whole lot of strong hiring trends happening across the board. But again, if you drill down, you'll see specific organizations that are doing particularly well. Like, for example, Amazon, who announced that they were going to be doing 100,000 jobs, having 100,000 jobs being created over time. So don't be discouraged by this, looking at it at the broad level. Make sure to drill down into the areas that are specific to you, but know that there are some big trends going on that may affect what's possible and how easy or tricky it's going to be to make the move you want. Now, no matter what is happening in the sector that you want to go into, and no matter what kind of career you'd like to move into, one thing it's important to remind yourself of is that your talents, gifts, and capabilities absolutely have value, no matter where you want to go. This is a really important piece to think about as you're thinking about where you want to bring your strengths next, because it can be really easy to get discouraged looking at the overall forecast of the market. But remember that what you do matters, what you do is valuable, and there will be a place that it fits into the marketplace no matter what.
2. Understand your talents.
So with that, let's talk about step number 2 to a career change, which is understand what your talents truly are and how valuable they are to the external world. So when you're thinking about making a career change, one of the challenges and one of the burdens that's on you in that process is to be able to show that you've got the qualifications that make you a great candidate. Employers are wonderful, but they aren't mind readers, and we have the burden of proof to show people exactly how we can contribute to their organization and to their sector. So doing a deep dive into who you are and how you contribute is a fabulous starting point to be able to articulate that really beautifully in your job search and pick out roles that are going to be a great fit for you and where you'll be a great candidate for them. The first step to understanding how you are a great candidate and what you can bring to the table is to perform a professional audit. So one thing to start with is the question of what soft and hard skills do I currently have? Hard skills are things that you learn in a classroom. This could be something like learning how to code and be a software engineer or a programmer. It could be something like learning how to run specific Excel pivot tables or Excel queries. And soft skills are the things that typically have to be learned in an on-the-job kind of context. It's not that they are any more or less valuable than one another. They're just different. Soft skills might be things like persuasion and presentation to a group. Soft skills might be like understanding how to be an empathetic manager who can help guide employees through challenges of their own. No matter whether they fall into the soft skill bucket or the hard skill bucket, make sure that you know what they are and what you bring to the table so you can talk about those to a future employer one day. Another question to ask yourself is on what are my biggest career wins? This is a reflection and a retrospective on what you've done throughout your work history that gets you proud, excited, confident, and really makes you want to talk about what you did and your contribution. When you peel back the layers on those times when you felt the most proud and the most alive in your career, oftentimes you can pull out these specific wins that were particularly interesting and fun and unique and that you'd like to be able to replicate in a role moving forward. That's part of the idea of identifying your transferable skills, which we'll talk about a bit more as we go here too. Another question to ask yourself is, what tasks, big and small, do I enjoy doing most? Even if it feels like it is so small, it's almost something that isn't even worth writing down, you might be really surprised by the value of something, be it proofreading, be it organizing, be it setting the agenda for a meeting, be it creating a really beautiful customer experience by thoughtful interactions with folks. There's nothing that is too big or too small if it's enjoyable to write down and pull your professional strengths and talents out of. And an important place to finish is asking yourself, what are my core values and non-negotiables? If one of your core values, for example, is environmental preservation, in order to figure out a place where you might fit in really, really well, you'll want to be really cognizant of what that organization is doing with respect to their environmental impact. It might be tricky to find a role for you in a sector like the energy industry, for example, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. So when you know and articulate what your core values truly are, it's going to make finding that fit much easier and much more streamlined for you.
Identify your transferable skills.
Now, I told you we'd come back to transferable skills here. So the next piece to go into is identifying what the transferable skills are. These are qualities that carry over from one role to another because they're useful to employers across various jobs and industries. Here in the blue, we've got a couple examples of different types of transferable skills, but this is by no means a comprehensive list. This is just a thought starter for you to think about some of the things that you're capable of that may be able to come out of the previous context that you were working in and the previous role in the previous sector, and that can transfer into a brand new role or opportunity and still have value. Things like decision-making, multitasking, creative problem solving, collaboration, written communication, professionalism, technology literacy, people management, initiative, customer service, and so much more. Oftentimes when I talk about transferable skills, I talk about this as your suite of ingredients. So imagine that you were, say, feeling like you wanted to bake and you were going to make chocolate cupcakes. In order to make these cakes, you would put in flour, cocoa powder, sugar, eggs, all sorts of different ingredients. And when you mix them together, the end result is that you get a chocolate cupcake. But if you deconstruct that and you look at just the suite of ingredients that you're working with, those things could come together in a lot of different ways. You could make a croissant. You could make a souffle. There are tons of different ways that the same ingredients can be recombined in new and unique ways. So this process is effectively figuring out what your ingredients are, what your talents are, and then figuring out the recombination that makes them transferable into a new place that both will feel good for you in the doing and will also feel great for your employer in receiving value in that way. Now, for a lot of folks, it can feel really challenging to figure out what are my strengths. I have all these things that I'm capable of, all these things that I can do, but out of them, which are the unique strengths that are most important for me?
In an illustration, a figure holds two ends of an arrow. The arrow points upward. Text, spot your strengths.
So the first thing to do is to listen to feedback, because you may have people in your life who have been speaking into your life and your career throughout the years who have been actually telling you what they see as areas of strength. Just because somebody else sees it externally does not mean that it's the be-all, end-all of your strengths, but it's a fabulous place to start, especially if you've ever won any awards, gotten compliments, gotten promoted for specific things, had specific things come out in any of the reviews that you've been through. Go back through an inventory of all of those different interaction points that you've had with others and notice what you have had comments or feedback or compliments on, and make a list of those things. Also, consider your passions or your interests. When you think about all the things that you're capable of doing, right, all your abilities, there's probably a subset of those things that you feel energetically attracted to. You enjoy doing them. You have natural momentum when you do them. You might even find yourself in a flow state where you lose track of time and lose track of what else is going on in your world. That subset is the set of activities that probably comprise your strengths and are great to look for in whatever that next role is. So notice that magnetic pull towards specific things over others. Similarly, pay attention to where you're most productive. If you find yourself getting into the zone and cranking out a ton of work that falls into one specific category of your abilities or strengths, it's likely that's a place where you'll be able to make a big contribution somewhere else moving forward. Now, if you haven't gotten feedback from others along the way in your career, when you're doing a professional audit like this, asking others directly for feedback can be a wonderful step. It can also be really affirming to get to hear people share in real time where they think your strengths and your opportunities are in your career. It can feel a little bit vulnerable to ask somebody and say, hey, I'm navigating a career change. I'm trying to figure out what to look at for my next move. Where have you seen my strengths and gifts in the past? But the feedback that you get, if you are willing to be vulnerable and put yourself out there to ask, can be invaluable in helping you to pick out a direction and create an advocate or a champion for you in the person who's giving you the feedback. 2 other things to do if you're curious about your strengths are to take a strengths assessment. There are lots and lots of personality and strengths assessments out there. 2 that are particularly good with helping you with your strengths in particular are the Gallup-Clifton Strengths Finder. It's been rebranded and renamed over the years, so that's a great one to check out. I recommend doing the top 5 themes report rather than your full suite of 34, because the top 5 are going to be the ones you're most likely to want to take action on. Or the Strengths Scope Assessment is also a fabulous one that tells you specifically about all of your capabilities and which ones are most energizing and motivating for you. And of course, the last thing to try after all these different things could also be seeking out new experiences. Noticing the types of things you find yourself attracted to, the kinds of classes you want to take, the kinds of skills you want to develop and learn even further, can be really prescriptive about the types of opportunities that might let you do that as part of your job.
3. Perform an in-depth career path discovery.
Step 3 to navigating a career change is to perform an in-depth career path discovery, to take all of this wonderful information you have learned about yourself and see what's out there, to start looking for the places where who you are and what you bring to the table and what the market needs really line up beautifully.
In an illustration, a woman reads a paper.
One place to look, especially if you are in that portion of our folks who are here today who are needing to make a transition because the job outlook in their industry has been affected by the pandemic, a great place to look is for adjacent or replacement roles. So, like we were talking about with that Harvard Business Review study of the 9%, when one part of the market disappears or takes a real hit, other markets will pop up to take their place. Imagine this just like when the light bulb was invented. The market for candles became a little bit different. It became much smaller, but the market for light bulbs had popped up and offered new employment. So the same thing can be true in looking at what's going on in the marketplace and where there might be opportunities for you. An example here is, let's say that you worked in the restaurant industry, and because of different regulations, not as many people can be inside of the restaurant anymore, and so there may be a reduced need for staffing there. Even though people can't be inside of the restaurant, people have still got to eat. So looking at all the different ways that people are getting food and getting nutrition may open up some interesting ideas of replacement industries or adjacent industries. And an example of an adjacent industry, for example, would be grocery stores and having people go and buy their food there and then cook it at home. And goodness knows that these essential workers are so valuable and so important right now in helping to keep our economy moving and helping people be fed. Replacement roles might be something like a meal delivery service or a catering company that, instead of catering big events like weddings that aren't really happening in the same way anymore, is cooking up a big batch of food and doing individual portion-sized deliveries to different homes. They might need logistics coordinators, they might need cooks, they might need drivers. They may need customer support folks who can be taking the orders and helping with all the pieces of managing those transactions. So think about what the adjacent or replacement industries might be to yours to see what else is out there that could be a really nice fit in this season.
In an illustration, a woman holds a tablet. Devices around her depict text and symbols, which include a multiplication sign and a greater than symbol.
Another thing to do, we were talking about recombination earlier, is think about creativity through recombination. This is the question of how might you take your transferable talents, strengths, and gifts and combine them in new ways to help you do different jobs that excite or intrigue you. So, for example, let's say that you're somebody from the hospitality industry and you recognize that your transferable skills include creating really beautiful experiences for people, thinking strategically, and let's say managing logistics. If you take those 3 elements, you can recombine them into some potentially really interesting career paths. It could be creating really beautiful experiences for people and managing logistics that you combine together into perhaps doing digital events or emceeing digital events. And maybe that's something that you're doing in corporate and seeing who does that kind of work. Maybe you take the creating incredible experiences and the strategy piece and you put those together and start looking at roles in customer experience, or user interface design. By being creative with taking those ingredients and putting them together in new and unique ways, you may find niche type careers, specialties, or specific parts of sectors or industries that you didn't even know existed until you had the creativity to look at it from a really unique angle.
Career Explorer. Learn more about career paths with information on job satisfaction, salaries, and more. Compare pay by city, read tips on making more money in your field and answers to your career questions. Indeed.com/career. Text on a Career Explorer page, build a career you'll love. How to become a customer success manager. What skills help customer success managers find jobs?
One fabulous tool for doing this sort of exploration about what's out there is from our wonderful friends at Indeed. If you go to indeed.com/career, you'll have access to the Career Explorer. This is a fabulous database of all kinds of different types of roles and titles where you can learn more about career paths with information on job satisfaction, salaries, and more. You can compare pay by city, read tips on making more money in your field, and get answers to your career questions. It is an awesome resource for this really comprehensive career exploration to help you see what it might be like to make a transition and help you either get even more excited about the opportunities in an area or notice if something actually might not be a great fit and save yourself time and effort and stress in trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. So check out indeed.com/career for more information there on your exploration journey. Then, once you've taken a look at everything that's out there, start to actually dive in more deeply and evaluate what roles and what opportunities feel like they might interest or intrigue you.
In an illustration, a woman looks at a laptop.
First, start by reading various job descriptions. Don't just judge a book by its cover, and don't just judge a job by its title. There may be a lot more underneath the surface of what a specific role is doing within an industry that may look really different. For example, the title account executive means hugely different things depending on what industry you're in. For example, if you're in the communications industry, account executive means that you are one of the more early stage career folks learning how to do basic communication functions. Whereas if you go into sales for a specific organization, an account executive might be a much more senior position that has a lot more expectation and a lot more responsibility. So notice your job description, read through the whole thing, and look at it in the context of the industry or sector that you're curious about to see what that might look like and feel like for you. Then compare the requirements and duties to those that you found in your professional audit. Essentially, when you did your professional audit, you came up with a short list of things that would feel most joyful, most exciting, and most fulfilling to get to do in whatever that career pivot is. So use that almost like a scorecard to take a look at the potential direction you want to go in and compare it to your professional audit to see how much alignment is there between what I said that I want and what this role has the opportunity for me to bring to the table. Again, it's a great way to head things off if something sounded really intriguing, but when you dig in further, doesn't actually match up with who you are and what you're prioritizing as your non-negotiables and values in this chapter of your career and life. You should also focus on positions for which you meet at least 60% of the qualifications with your transferable skills. Now, there are some studies out there about different gendered norms when it comes to applying for roles that people who identify as women oftentimes will not apply for a role unless they meet 95% of the job description. That's going to be challenging for two reasons. Reason number one is that when you're making a career change, there is inherently going to be a specific gap between what you've done and what you want to move into. So be not afraid to apply to things where there may not be as much alignment as you might have been used to in your previous career. Otherwise, you're not going to be applying for anything. But the second reason why looking for a 100% fit may not always serve you is that if you move into a role where you are fitting 100% of the qualifications on their job application, you are likely to be having very little room for growth, advancement, or feeling challenged. And you're probably going to end up coming in at the top of their budget for what that role is slated in their budget for that quarter, which may mean that there are reduced opportunities to get promotions, to get raises, to be able to keep growing your salary over time. So be not afraid to apply for things where you may not be the perfect fit, but you meet 60, 70, or 80% of the qualifications on paper, because you might actually benefit from that just as much as the organization does. And every organization knows that when they hire somebody on, there is going to be a certain amount of upskilling, reskilling, and teaching somebody their new systems and processes. So there is an expectation that there will be some on-the-job learning that happens no matter what. The last thing to be thinking about as you're evaluating all the roles that are out there is to keep track. Save a list of 15 to 20 jobs that interest you. And then as you go through your discernment process, start to narrow those down to your top short list to consider further and maybe look at putting your job search processes around as you move forward.
4. Select what roles to pursue.
Step 4, once you've done all that exploration, you've done your own personal audit and you evaluated what's out there in the marketplace, is selecting what roles to pursue. This is where you take that short list of 3 to 5 jobs or 10 to 15, wherever you were in your process, and you really narrow it down to the 1 or 2 roles that are going to be the best fit for you, given your transferable skills, given your interests, given what you value and what you're prioritizing in this season of life, and given what's going on in the marketplace.
Narrow your job list to 1 to 2 roles.
This decision should be made thinking, number 1, about those non-negotiables. Are you in a season of life where you absolutely need to be making a specific salary band or a specific compensation number? Or are you in a specific season of life where the most important thing to you is having ultimate flexibility? Whatever that is will help you to make the decision on which roles are going to be the best fit for you right now. Another thing to consider is your career goals. So thinking about, where do I want to grow? Where do I want to go? What doors would I like to open through this next move? Thinking about where you'd like to be, even just 3 to 5 years down the road, can be really helpful in articulating which of all the paths you're considering might best allow you to move in that direction. Having a career vision in that way can be an incredibly helpful and important thing. Then, of course, evaluating your transferable skills, gifts, and talents and seeing how they fit will be a really great thing to do too. If you're looking at several different roles, and for one of them, you tend to only fit about 60% of the qualifications, but for another set of roles, you tend to fit more like 80% of the qualifications, that may be a better place to go and start looking to get more immediate traction on your job search, because there's less lift and less of a burden for you to prove that you can fill that gap if it's more on the 80% side than the 60% side. And obviously, just like we talked about on the previous slides, if you're looking at a potential career direction and you only meet about 40 or 30% of what the typical required capabilities or experiences look like, while that may be something that could be a great fit for you down the line, again, thinking about your evaluation of if now is the right time to make a career change, it may not be the right thing to make an immediate transition into next. And you may need to find something else that is a bridge or a stepping stone that can move you in a directionally correct way towards that, but that isn't quite as big of a leap for employers to have to try to understand and to take a chance on you with. So make sure that you do that skill evaluation and feel like you're in a good sweet spot of what you bring to the table and the gap for learning. Of course, then, looking at the available opportunity is important. Thinking about the data that we were talking about earlier with what's going on in the marketplace will be really important to evaluate there to make sure that you are aligned with places that are growing and hiring. And make sure that you take a look at the barriers to entry. If you have done all of this evaluation, and let's say that you really want to become a dentist, you feel like dentistry is an incredible field, you're excited, you're passionate about it, but you don't have your doctorate degree in dental education, it may be too big of a barrier to start applying for those sorts of roles right now. And while that's a little bit of a humorous example, there are other examples just like that of fields where there may be an educational barrier to entry or other barriers that make it a little bit too challenging to do right now. But again, you may be able to find a bridge or a stepping stone job that moves you in that direction. So you're set up to make that career move on a longer timeline. Think about your own risk tolerance. Think about your financial runway. Think about what would feel good for you and narrow down your list of possible jobs accordingly.
Begin to bridge any skill gaps. Consider free or low-cost online courses before committing to a new degree or certification. Industry-related books, articles, and podcasts. Volunteering or independent projects.
And if you notice that there is a skill gap, think about ways that you may be able to bridge those skill gaps. Oftentimes when people think about skill gaps, it feels intimidating of, oh goodness, I don't want to go back to school. I don't want to take out more student loans. And I want to be the first to tell you, for most careers you may want to move into, you probably don't need to go back to school and invest the time and the energy to make your transition. If you want to go be a dentist, that's a different story. That's important. That's an important barrier to entry. But for whatever transition you're thinking about making, especially if it's a bit more of a pivot or a stepping stone, there may be free or low-cost online courses that you can take before committing to something bigger like a degree or a more intensive certification. Check out places like edX, Coursera, Udemy, and others that offer up things that are very low cost online, where you can take even just a single class to get a taste for something, or take a couple of classes in a series to learn the language of the industry that you want to move into without having to do something big like enroll in a 2-year graduate program. You can also bridge skill gaps by looking at industry-related books, articles, and podcasts. This can be a great way to get a sense of a day in the life, how people in this industry tend to talk about themselves, the sorts of things that they look at as metrics for success that you can speak to in your own application, and can help you to feel better equipped and better able to speak to why this is a place that you want to move into. And one of my favorite ways to bridge a skill gap is to look for ways to work on projects on your own. It could be doing a volunteer project. It could be doing a pro bono project. It could be an independent project that you do as speculative work, to send over to a future employer to show them what you could bring to the table. It could even be freelancing or consulting, where you're actually getting paid to upskill in this area and bring your transferable skills and your transferable perspective in. There are lots of creative things to look for here if you give yourself the permission to think in an untraditional way about experiences and opportunities to get education that'll bridge that skill gap effectively.
5.
Step 5 in making your transition is to rebrand and reposition yourself in your professional materials. Like we talked about before, employers are not necessarily mind readers, so that burden is on us to show them exactly how all those wonderful transferable skills that we bring to the table come to life in their world.
2 pieces of a puzzle not yet placed.
So as you are rebranding yourself, prepare your job search tools. Build a generalized version of your resume that can be tailored to new job descriptions. Tailoring your resume to send it in before you press the submit button is so important. There's a colloquial phrase called the spray and pray approach that we talk about in career change, where if you make one version of your resume and you send it out to every single person, it's going to feel impersonal. It's going to feel like a form letter, and it's not necessarily going to get you the same results as taking the time and the care to look at a specific job description, make sure that you're reflecting those particular words, those phrases, those skills in your own materials, and then saving a new version of your resume before you submit it. This can, admittedly, take a little bit of time and can slow you down in your process. So a general version of your resume may be a 2 to 3 page long boilerplate version of your resume that has every bullet underneath of it that you think you might use. That way, when you find a job description that you're excited about, you can make a copy of the general resume and then shorten it way up to only include those relevant bullets. And that process of just deleting and editing out experiences can be done in a matter of minutes rather than a matter of hours. So this can be a fabulous step to take at the beginning to streamline and make your search more efficient as you go. Another extremely important thing for career changers is to have a professional summary section at the top of your resume. This is a little bit different from an objective section. Objective is a little bit more of an antiquated thing to have on your resume. So if you have an objective, just refresh it and title it as professional summary instead now. But this is effectively putting together the statement that helps a future employer see how your previous experiences actually contribute to you being able to create value for them. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a moment. You want to also write a cover letter template, kind of like this generalized resume version as well, that conveys how your skills and experiences have prepared you to make the transition successfully. This is your opportunity to do some storytelling about who you are and infuse some personality into this so that you come across as a little bit more multidimensional than just a two-dimensional piece of paper. So this is a really important piece to stand out too. And even though the statistics say that only about 50% of hiring managers read cover letters, if you don't send in a cover letter and that particular hiring manager happens to be one of the 50%, you're immediately disqualifying yourself and all the time and effort that you took to tailor your resume. So even though it feels like it's a little laborious, it's a really important step just in case. And plan how you'll answer interview questions. Getting that storytelling element right that we talked about with the professional summary and the cover letter can be critically important to making the kind of impression that will help you to get doors opened in the ways that you want. So, to that storytelling point, you might encounter the question in your cover letter, in the interview, in an informational conversation that you have with somebody about making a transition, where they ask you, tell me about yourself. You might also get a question like, why are you interested in this position? These are questions it's really important to have an answer to. And this is a model that I love for telling the story about who you are.
The soul story model. Why, how, now.
It's called the soul story model, and it's from storytelling coach Kat Short. There are 3 elements to it: the why, the how, and the now. When it comes to telling your soul story about why you are making a transition, or tell me about yourself and who you are, why we're having this conversation, the why is something that is tied to your values and can be a little bit more personal than a sort of more traditional professional statement. So for example, if I was, let's say, making the transition from marketing into product management, my why might be something to the effect of, throughout my career and my life, it's always felt really important for me to share about tools that work well and that can help people. The how is then the statement about how you've been doing that in the past up until this point. So as a career changer, as somebody who used to do marketing, I might then go on to say, previously in my career, I would talk about tools that were great and that could help people's lives through marketing by doing digital marketing campaigns, spreading the news about things, and raising awareness so that we could get more customers and more users. The now statement is a conversation about what you want to do next, where you're going, and taking a step towards that hiring manager and towards that opportunity. So using my same example here, the now statement could be, now what I realized is that I want to be a part of creating those incredible experiences and creating those incredible products, which is why I'm making the transition into product management. So I can be involved in creating those features and making things accessible from the very beginning. So think about the why, how, and now that could help for you to contextualize who you are and why you're making a transition in a very easy to understand, very simple to remember kind of a framework.
6.
And then 6, you are ready to start the job search process for your career change. Once you've done your audit, once you have evaluated the landscape, once you've narrowed down into the roles that are a great fit, and once you have gotten your branding and positioning tailored to perfection. One of the biggest things that can help for doing a job search effectively is developing strategic relationships. The Bureau of Labor Statistics in the United States every year does a study on how people find and successfully land their jobs. And every year, the BLS consistently shows that 70% or more of jobs come from relationships. So make sure that you are thinking about how to use all your existing relationships, as well as think about potentially making some new ones.
In an illustration, a woman and man sit together and talk.
Tap into your existing network of connections. And just like we were talking about earlier with vulnerability, be not afraid to ask folks for their help and support. This could be past friends, neighbors, classmates, former colleagues. It could be folks who you have even known socially. Maybe you played in a softball league together, or you were in a book club together, or you have the same place of worship. Letting people know that you're on the market, that you need some support, and you know what you're looking for can be a fabulous way to get people to have an ear to the ground for you and help bring things your way. Another thing to think about when it comes to relationships is adding more and new relationships into your life. This could be finding professional organizations for your field of interest. There are tons of affinity groups that are specific to particular roles, particular sectors or industries, or particular geographies that would be worth doing some Googling and some creative searching around to find and then become a part of, to embed yourself in that community and then ask for help and support there. And you can always reach out to people at your dream companies. I have done this throughout my own career back when I was working in corporate myself. Even cold outreach, when you provide a persuasive, compelling story, like your soul story, can actually get people to respond to you, be willing to set up a conversation, and be willing to support you.
A hand holds a paper airplane. Text, decide when to tailor your applications. General resume applications only somewhat interest you. You meet less than 60% of the qualifications. Customized resume applications closely align with your goals. You meet more than 60% of the qualifications.
Then, make sure you've decided when to tailor your applications. If you meet less than 60% of the qualifications for a role, or it only somewhat interests you, feel free to send along your general resume, or feel free to skip applying for those roles in particular. Obviously, if you're on unemployment and you need to be showing that you are applying for things, feel free to apply for them, but don't invest too much time or effort into that kind of thing when you could be customizing your resume with a role that closely aligns with your goals, or you meet more than 60% of the qualifications and you're excited about it. Make sure that you're working smarter, not harder, on how you're using your energy and your time. And take advantage of timing. This is a fabulous season to be looking because January and February are known as the top months for hiring.
In an illustration, a man draws a circle.
Many companies, perhaps not all, but many companies get new access to calendar year budget cycles that allowed them for more headcount or to be hiring on contractors or freelancers. And you may experience some delays in early January as folks are coming back from the holidays, getting access to these budgets and thinking about their strategy for the coming calendar year. But right now is a really hot time to be applying, getting interviews, and getting offers.
Keep track of jobs and applications. Save jobs and easily find them later on Indeed's My Jobs page when you are ready to apply. myjobs.indeed.com.
And of course, is there any better tool to be finding opportunities, submitting your applications, and keeping track of your efforts than Indeed? I don't know. Check out myjobs.indeed.com to save jobs that you're finding, easily find them later when you're ready to apply for them, submit your applications, keep track of everything, and more. It is a fabulous tool to stay organized and keep track of what you're doing to make sure your efforts are working for you. So, we've covered our 6 steps to a successful career change. Decide if now's the time, understand who you are, what you value, what you bring to the table, perform an in-depth career path discovery exploration, select the ideal roles to pursue right now, rebrand and position yourself appropriately, and start the job search process. And it was an honor to get to be with you here today. Again, my name is Lisa Lewis Miller. I wrote the book Career Clarity. I'm the host of the Career Clarity Show podcast, and I run the website getcareerclarity.com. And I'd be delighted to get to connect with any and all of you after this Jobcast presentation today. But as we bring this to a close, I'll go ahead and bring the Indeed team back on, and we will tackle some of the questions that came into the Q&A as we were going today. So thank you so much for being here with us, and let's dive into some of those questions.
Brandy Warwas.
So now let's look at some of the top questions that came in. And there are hundreds of questions in the queue. So if we don't get to your question today, remember to post it later as a comment on the YouTube video so our team can respond there. So top voted question, how do I overcome a lack of experience in a technical field to transition quickly?
That's a great question, Brandy. So thank you for bringing that one up. So if you're looking to move into a technical field where there is a certain amount of hard skill utilization that's going to be required, the best thing to do is find opportunities to create that skill and practice and polish that skill independently on your own time. One of the things that we talked about was looking at great resources like Udemy, edX, or Coursera, which are places where you can take free or low-cost online classes to get more information. But if you're looking at a specific technical skill, it's worth looking to see if there are any types of boot camps or intensives where you may get a little bit more hands-on, one-on-one feedback from an instructor to help you learn and hone that skill set. There are quite a few things that exist out there where you can actually build hard skills in independent, asynchronous learning environments. But looking at places that offer up boot camps like General Assembly, for example, might be a really worthwhile place to go to quickly, efficiently, and oftentimes fairly affordably build up the skill set that then you can be referencing on your resume under, say, a trainings and certifications section.
The next one here is, how do you overcome entry-level positions that want 3 to 5 years of experience?
Oh, this is such a great question, and it is such a frustration. So one of the things to think about, as we were talking about earlier in this presentation about that 60% or more match, is if somebody says they want 3 to 5 years of experience, what they're communicating in that is 3 to 5 years of experience is a proxy for something. It's standing in for something. That may mean we want to see that you can actually do this skill set, or we want to see that this is not your first time exploring this industry or sector. So don't get encouraged by it or discouraged by the 3 to 5 year piece of it. And think about, how can I prove to them that I have the kinds of things that 3 to 5 year requirement is supposed to stand in for? Can I show them skills, certifications, and trainings? Can I show them a portfolio of things that I might have worked on in an educational capacity? Can I show them an internship experience or anything else that I've done, maybe even volunteer experiences that count towards the types of professional experiences that might comprise a little bit more of that 3 to 5 years? It is frustrating. You're not alone in being confused by that kind of a thing. But don't let the 3 to 5 years completely throw you off. Look at what the other things are that they're asking for in terms of responsibilities or qualifications, and see how you can make the case that you have those things to be able to get over that years of experience hump.
Similarly, overcoming the educational requirements for job postings.
It's absolutely the same thing. Like we were talking about with dentists, there are some fields where you absolutely must have a specific educational degree in order to be able to practice. But for most places, when they're looking for a specific educational background, it's again a proxy for something else. Let's say you want to apply for a role in marketing and they are requiring an undergraduate degree in communications or journalism, and you don't have that, or maybe you didn't even go to undergrad. The best things that you can do are show them that you have the types of experiences and skills that educational experience might have conferred to somebody. You just got them through your own means. Be not afraid to make the case that your work experience, your other types of training and certification, volunteer experiences, internships, or anything else that you've done over the years may composite in a composite may give you the same type of experience, or perhaps even more relevant experiences than just a specific degree alone.
Yeah, and there may be even a way to position it to show that you were a self-starter in gaining those skills, right? So it's not just, oh, I did my undergrad, sat through that course and, got the basics of that knowledge, but you went out and sought out those skill sets. So I think that is meaningful to employers as well.
Absolutely. And Brandy, what I'll say too is that some of the top tier, most coveted brands and employers, like say Google, have started to drop having educational requirements at all from their job applications. And if a place like Google is willing to do that, typically they set the tone for a lot of the different changes that happen across job markets. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the next 5 to 10 years, most organizations no longer have a specific educational requirement on their job descriptions. So we may be in just a funky transition period where employers are rethinking what experiences and skills matter most and where people get those.
That's such a good point. Indeed actually has recently lifted their educational requirements for certain roles. And I think, it's just so great for these leaders in the industries to be pushing for that, especially while education is so expensive. So that should hopefully make it easier to transition to new fields in the future. Another question here, if you're moving into a different life stage and are looking for a position that may be lower level than what your resume would indicate, should you omit or tone down prior experience? So for instance, say you're a new parent and you want to be home more. So you're looking for a role that's a little less demanding. Should you tweak your resume accordingly?
So there are two pieces to this. Piece number one is that if you are wanting to make something that's going to look a little bit like an untraditional job move, this is one of the reasons why strategic relationship building is so important, because there's no better way to tell your story than being able to tell it yourself verbally. Even if you're doing it through Zoom or through FaceTime or through Skype or through whatever different digital means, when you get to explain your rationale and what you're thinking, it helps to humanize you and it helps to contextualize you in a way that'll make it easier for an employer to want to take a chance on you. Now, that said, it's really important to also think about your resume as a strategic marketing document and think about it as not the full comprehensive history of everything you've ever done in your career, but as the snapshot of the specific experiences that you've had that may be most relevant to a future employer. So if you think about it through that lens and you are curating or pruning your resume to only show the things that are the most relevant to a future employer, it may ultimately help you to also position yourself differently for a role, especially if it's something that you're transitioning into that you may not have had as much previous experience in. So I think that when you think about your resume as a strategic marketing document, we don't want for you to be lying or doing anything unethical. But if you are pruning off experiences that aren't going to be valuable or relevant to a future employer, and it also helps to make things look a little bit more streamlined and compact and make you look more qualified for things at different levels of qualification than you might have been applying for in ordinary circumstances, that's absolutely something that's valid to do.
And I know we're at time, but we'll do one more question here. How do I get a job and or change careers when I'm unemployed? So a lot of folks are unemployed right now and might be seeking a different direction with their career. How does that change the advice we've given?
It ultimately doesn't change the advice a ton. It absolutely feels more stressful to do job applications when you're unemployed. And it can feel like you're not being given the same fair shake when you know you have a gap on your resume. So what that means is that it's even more important to lean into your strategic relationships, talk with people, tell them about your situation, find opportunities to be able to apply and do things that might be a little bit more creative. And it's still absolutely important to be tailoring your resume and making sure that it is a great fit for what you're applying to. I think that employers right now are a little bit more compassionate and understanding than they've had to be in previous times because of all the shakeups that have happened for people. So be not afraid to keep applying, but absolutely make sure that you're doing everything in your power to cultivate those relationships and those professional networks to help source opportunities and to be able to tell your story so that they give you a chance so that people aren't going to be judging you solely based on your resume and any perceived gaps on that alone. One other thing that I'll throw out there is that when you talk about your professional experience, there's no law that says that that has to all be paid experience. So if you are helping and supporting an organization, even in a volunteer capacity, even in a part-time capacity, to fill the time in between your employment, that can go on your resume as a professional experience that is your present professional experience. So be not afraid to look for opportunities like that where you may be able to do something that is volunteer, an internship, something that's pro bono, something that is freelance, something that's consulting. Any of those things can be valid and can help, especially if you're feeling self-conscious or nervous about having a potential gap in your experience.
Absolutely. Any opportunities you have to fill that gap of time with upskilling or ways that are just going to help get you closer to the career you want is going to be beneficial. And employers will appreciate seeing that you've spent the time in a meaningful way. So that's all the time we have today.
Register for an upcoming virtual workshop or watch on demand.
So if you found this to be helpful, check out our other jobcasts at go.indeed.com/jobcast. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below.
Jobcast by Indeed.